Hey, I've been wanting to do a video discussing my experience with runner's anemia because I thought it might help other people as well, and also kind of to document it for myself before I forget everything. So, runner's anemia in this article that I found is basically described as an anemia that may include plasma volume expansion, hemolysis from pounding of the feet, which basically means like crushing of the blood cells, and hemoglobinuria, which means like some of your hemoglobin, which is the part of the red blood cells coming out in the urine. So, as a disclaimer, I am a nurse, but this is not really my area of expertise, and so I really want to make this more about my experience. Also like to shout out Meredith Johnston and Ken Schultz, that they are part of the running community, and they had put me onto this idea of runner's anemia. What happened was, back in October of 2024, I posted on the Supwell app suggesting that I was going to do a deload, waiting for my annual checkup with my doctor in November. And I had felt a lot of fatigue, and my performance was absolutely in the tank on my running. It just felt so difficult. And I thought, maybe it's a lung injury. Maybe I had COVID. I've never had COVID to my knowledge, but I thought, well, maybe I had asymptomatic COVID, and it caused an injury that I wasn't aware of. And the other thing that I thought was, could be some kind of anemia, but I wasn't sure why. I also thought, well, maybe lack of sleep. Maybe I just couldn't do what I could do when I was younger. I'm over 50 now, and maybe I'm pushing myself too hard. So some of the symptoms that I had, and some of the symptoms that are listed, include things like fatigue, craving for ice, gastrointestinal problems, swelling of the legs, being pale, headaches, increased heart rate, increased sensitivity to cold. So the first thing that I really noticed was the fatigue. That for me, usually, my normal was going out there and doing like 6 miles at, a little under an hour, somewhere around like a 9-minute or so pace for most of it. And I was at a point where I would struggle to keep up an actual run for 3 or 4 blocks, and my mile split times were up at like 15 minutes. So it was really, really significant drop off. And like there's a hill that in around one of my routes, and I used to run up that hill, and then I'd kind of slow down and kind of catch my breath, and I got to a point where maybe I could make it up the hill, maybe I couldn't, and when I did, I had to stop. Then I did have the ice craving, like to a crazy degree, and that's kind of something that's very typical of anemia. So also noticed, and some of the things I didn't really notice until I noticed them in hindsight. So I had noticed that my appetite wasn't as good, that I just felt full faster, and that maybe I had like a little bit of nausea if I was going to go and exercise too soon after eating. And I think maybe it was an issue of like blood flow in my system. As a nurse, I am on my feet all the time, and I was getting more swelling in my legs. And I thought, okay, well, you know, I've been doing this for 15 plus years, and I'm not a kid anymore. Maybe so. You know, I was trying different compression socks and stuff like that, and nothing really helped. And you know, I usually had that slow athlete's heart rate. And I do feel like it just wasn't as slow as it used to be. Again, because my heart was probably pumping, had to pump more times in order to get the amount of oxygen through there. And one of the things I didn't notice until I was getting better was I started to get better, and I started to look at my hands, look at myself in the mirror, and I was like, oh my God, I'm pink again. I hadn't realized how pale I had been. So after I looked up the runner's anemia a little bit, and I found that it was typically considered an iron deficiency anemia. So I started taking some iron pills, and this was like 2 or 3 weeks before going to the doctor. And so by the time I went to my appointment, I was already significantly better. I remember it was a couple days before my appointment, and I had gone for a short, run, like 4.5 miles, and going up the street, I had the stamina, and I was just running and running, and I was like, I feel like me again. And so I went to the doctor, I explained my symptoms, and he said, you should do a colonoscopy. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do a colonoscopy. I told him, I was trying to tell him, listen to me. I'm telling you what my symptoms were. I'm telling you what is helping. And, he's a young doctor. And so he wasn't really getting it. I don't have, he's thinking GI bleed, he's thinking colon cancer, stuff like that. I don't have any family history of that. I eat a whole food, plant-based, very high-fiber diet, which also decreases the risk. And I'm not really in favor of a colonoscopy. It's a very invasive procedure, and every procedure has risks. Been working in a hospital for over 15 years. I've seen that when they tell you what the risks are, sometimes they happen. So I went to my appointment in November, and they drew my labs, and I just want to talk about a couple of them. So a lot of times when they're talking about your red blood cell levels, talk about what we call hemoglobin and hematocrit. So I printed out some of my labs here. This was my hemoglobin. This was from January of 2023 when they had previously drawn it, and it just absolutely tanked here to November, and then you see it started to shoot up again. So in November, remember, I was already feeling better, and my iron was already, I'd already been taking the iron pills for about 3 weeks, and in November, my hemoglobin already was still reading 7.9, which the reference range for normal is 13.3 to 17.7, so low. And what we discussed is that I would come back a month later after continuing to to take the iron pills, and we would redraw. And so I came back a month later, feeling even better, and it came back. It went from 7.9 to 11.3. Still not up to normal, but much better. And I was starting to perform more like normal in my exercise. Hematocrit, same thing. Reference range of 38.8 to 53.2. I was 30 in November, came back a month later, was up to 38. So everything making progress. My total iron in November. This is a reference range of 61 to 157. My iron in November was 13. Again, after taking the iron supplements for about 3 weeks, and went all the way up to 87. So got all the way up to normal range in a month. And then the last one that I'll discuss is my ferritin level, which is, it's basically a blood test that can tell you whether or not you're getting too much or too little iron. So reference range here is 30 to 400. And we just did the one in November. He didn't order it again for December. I'm not sure why. But when I went in November, it was 21. So much less than the low end of the 30. So anyways, so yeah, just in that 1 month, I was already making good progress. And even the 3 weeks before I ever had my labs done, that I was making progress. I don't know what it started at. So it was even lower than these really low levels that I was at. So where am I now? For one thing, and you can tell just by looking at me, I'm pink again. I always thought of myself that I would look pink, but never really made the connection of that being because of my blood flow. Because, and I've always been somebody with good stamina. And when I go running, I just feel like me. You know, I can go out and, you know, run 9, 10, 12, 14 miles. And you know, I could just go out and do it in an easy pace, and I'm fine. I don't have this thing like I run 3 or 4 blocks, or, you know, or I run up the, you know, to the 7th floor, up the stairs at work, and you know, my heart feels like it's going to, you know, pound right out of my chest. I enjoy eating the crushed ice, but I don't crave it like I used to. It was very, very significant. I've also noticed that, because I've always been sensitive to cold. I think, you know, I'm very thin, very lean, but I think it was way more significant as far as that sensitivity to cold. So I don't have that as much. My heart rate is back to normal, and the swelling of my legs has really gone down, and it's just not an issue anymore. You know, so I hope that this has been informative. If you're having any of these kind of symptoms, that might be something to look into. You know, like I said, this runner's anemia it's not something that's going to happen to everybody, but it is something that happens from the impact on the road that can cause some damage to the red blood cells. And so if you're not getting enough iron, then perhaps you're not able to replenish them quick enough. So just something to think about. And if you found this informative, I hope you give it a thumbs up and have a good day. Okay, thanks.